Welcome everybody to the Be Empowered show. My name's Graham Hopkins. I'm the host, and the Be Empowered show is a conversation about what it is like to feel empowered, to feel connected as opposed to feel separated from. Today's conversation is about spiritual intelligence. Now, to set the foundation for today's conversation with Veronika Tracy-Smith, I'd like to define spiritual intelligence. Now, this definition comes from Cindy Wigglesworth, and she defines spiritual intelligence as the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion whilst maintaining an inner and outer peace, regardless of the situation. I love that definition. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our guest for today, Veronika Tracy-Smith. Welcome, Veronika.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and I love the work that you're doing in the world because it's hand in hand with the work that I'm doing with Raising Consciousness Now and Consciousness Now coaching, and I'm very excited to be here and connect with you, Graham.
Excellent, Veronika. While we're there, can you let me explain firstly that Veronika is the founder and host of Consciousness Now TV and the co-founder of an international group called Raising Consciousness Now. Veronika, maybe you can, before we get into how you got into all of this, maybe you can just summarize what those two things are.
Certainly, yeah. Well, Consciousness Now TV is interviews and teaching about raising consciousness now on the planet. So they really go hand in hand, and so does our coaching site. And it's really about the ripple effect and how we do the work on our own personal selves with our emotional intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, you know, really our relationship work in our own corner of the world. Really looking at, well, we don't have to save the whole world, but by taking care of ourselves and the interactions that we have with our family and our friends and with the people that we work with, that is the ripple effect. That's how we raise the consciousness on the planet and make the world a better place. And that ripple effect, to me, has been something that I've always talked about and taught about in my teachings through the years working with clients, because that's what's so powerful in our lives, and that's where we can have influence and some control.
I'd like to just share a testimony that I got off your website, Veronika, and it says, "It is a beautiful guided walk through the evolution from the ego self to the awakening and recognition of the higher self." And then another one says, "I've accepted parts of myself that I've previously devalued and ignored. I now trust my intuition more." I'm just wondering, Veronika, if you could just enlighten us as to what you mean by going from the ego self to awakening and recognition of our higher self. What does that mean?
Yeah, certainly. It has been what I've explored as a therapist. I'm a psychologist by trade and have done that for many years, 26 years or so, and then switched over to coaching. So in learning about spiritual intelligence coaching and getting trained, started having a language actually to put to my spirituality and to working with clients in a bigger format of not just our small self or our ego self. And there's certainly many, many parts of ourselves, looking at, you know, the parent in us, the child in us, the critic, the adult in us. And we have so many parts. We could, you know, name them all. The rebel in us. And those are really connected to the ego part of us. And the ego has an agenda, and if it runs our life, we want to be right. It limits our growth. It limits our capacity for really deeper wisdom and compassion. And the higher self holds those parts. The higher self is, some people kind of balk at the higher self, and we could also say our best self. One thing that Cindy Wigglesworth did is she looked at all of the traits of people that we most admire. So maybe for a minute, everyone who is watching this can think about, who are the people that you admire in your life, that you look up to. They might be mentors. They might be people that you've never met, like the Dalai Lama. A lot of people put on the list of Dalai Lama, Jesus, Oprah, maybe their mother, their father, their grandparents. Great leaders, great people that they look up to, and they have these traits that we really want to emulate. And we can call that our higher self or our best self. A lot of scientists would rather call it the noble self, and so Cindy's really been using the word noble self. You know, it's who we know that we can be. It's our potential of the best possible us that we can be. And excuse me, I'm fighting this cold a little bit. So going from the ego to the higher self feels like quite the big jump, a big leap sometimes. We all have had those times where we can tap into that best self of ours, but it might be difficult to sustain it. And the sustainability part, I think, takes some working up to. And with spiritual intelligence, it's not just a woo thing. It is actual skills. There's 21 skills that we teach and that we help people to identify and to see. We have an assessment that we do to see where you are at on that scale for each of those 21 skills, and then up to you what you want to work with. So bridging that gap from the ego to the higher self is a big jump. And one thing that my friend Debbie Della Cuesta and I started to develop is looking at that, calling it the witness self. And we really believe that that witness self is the bridge between the ego self and the higher self. The goal really is to have the higher self in charge most of the time, and we're not perfect, right? When, you know, we all can flare up or, you know, not be our best self, and then we need to go back for grace and forgiveness of ourselves. But if we can watch ourselves, if we can have this other part of us that is the witness self, the part that watches, oh wow, that was just my ego reacting. And I tell people, where in your body do you feel your ego reacting? Where are those strong feelings coming? Not strong feelings of compassion, but really of reactivity. So we have a life event. If we can pause and train ourselves, deep breath in, or maybe 3 breaths or 10 breaths, whatever it takes you, to create that pause before you react. Now you can engage that witness self, and you can engage your higher self, because as soon as you stop whatever dynamic that is, then you have the opportunity really to change your choices. You were reacting from your ego self. I always know where it is. It's right in my gut. My third chakra, my gut, it's right there. That's whenever I feel like, oh, you know, my husband might say something and I had a reaction, and it's like, oh, there goes my ego. And it's, you know, it can kind of be a game eventually as you work on this, and sometimes it's not a game at all. It's really serious, but sometimes it's like, wow, I just noticed my ego, and I really, that's something I personally work on in my life a lot, to catch my ego and just to know what it might need, because sometimes our ego is really a reaction to when we were a little child, and maybe it's that baby inside of us or that child self that needs some nurturing, feels rejected, feels like that part of me is not lovable. I grew up with abuse in my family and alcoholism, and so, you know, I know that road very well. I've worked on it a long time, and this spiritual intelligence is really kind of higher emotional intelligence, or like at an advanced level that you kind of build on your emotional intelligence. So you got to have the scaffolding for all of this, and you have to work the other part first. So recognizing that ego self, witnessing it, and then having that choice to say, all right, I've got my ego here. I want to make the choice to react from that higher self, from my best part of who I am. And that's what creates the ripple effect, because when I can do that, or maybe sometimes it means saying nothing at all, and when I can do that, I think, who was it? Oh gosh, what's his name? Can't remember. Wayne Dyer. He said, when you say nothing, sometimes you create a miracle. And it's really true.
Veronika, I'm just curious, do you find that people get a little bit defensive initially when you use the word spiritual in spiritual intelligence?
Excuse me. Yeah, I think that it depends who you're talking to, and what the group is. John Mackey of Whole Foods, he's the CEO of Whole Foods now, has introduced spiritual intelligence into his leadership training. And as you know, I do leadership training and work with, I do executive coaching and leadership coaching, and bringing the emotional intelligence and doing that work first and showing how important that is in the workplace is the stepping off point. And I think that if you are working with people longer term, you're helping them to identify when their ego gets triggered and if they're ready for it. I always use that witnessing self. And sometimes you don't have to use that terminology at all, but when you know more about the 21 skills of spiritual intelligence, and certainly anyone can pick up Cindy's book, Cindy Wigglesworth, it's called SQ21, the 21 skills of spiritual intelligence, or read some of our articles on consciousnessnowcoaching.com. You start to identify, like having a deeper mission, keeping your spirit in charge, or keeping your best self or your noble self, or whatever part, because I help people identify the parts. And sometimes leaders are used to having their warrior in there, and there's a time for that warrior, and there's a time for that wisdom and that compassion, and to work with your head and your heart at the same time. Bringing in the Myers-Briggs into that too can really create a deeper conversation. And so the spiritual intelligence really is that deeper life mission based on your values, based on what it is that you truly want for yourself, in how you are a leader, or for personal coaching, in spiritual communities. I work in nonprofits as well, and sometimes they're really ready for it and sometimes they're not. So, I think that languaging is so important for professionals to speak the language and know the developmental stages of the people that you're working with. So that's another area that I really focus on, not just as a psychologist, but there's a lot out there for coaches as well. And for all of us to look at where we are developmentally, and looking at that second half of life, because I think that second half of life stage is a place that people are more ready for the language of spirituality, or maybe not so much the word spiritual. I don't know. Again, it depends on the person, because spiritual has nothing to do with religion, and that's one thing I love about the work of spiritual intelligence, is that it's faith friendly and it's faith neutral, meaning that you don't have to be of any faith, and the assessment is really based on that it's faith friendly and faith neutral as well. Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you right, I think what you're saying is that you take people from their physical intelligence and you move them up to their IQ, and then it's emotional intelligence, and then the final one is spiritual intelligence. So it becomes a progression that people can easily understand.
Yeah, that was really the original format and structure of how Cindy looked at that. And Cindy is an expert in integral theory too. I don't know if you know about integral, but it looks at the interior and the exterior and the social and the cultural and the systems. But what she found, and I think Daniel Goldman was hopeful in this, or Richard Boyatzis, I'm not sure which one she worked with on this, but really the foundation is the physical intelligence. And we all know that when we get tired and hungry, of course, we're not going to be our best self, and spiritually, I know there's been times on vacation when the kids are in the back car and everybody's cranky, and all of us, not just the kids, and then you feed everybody and everybody's happy, and it's like, oh, what are we doing now? So hormones, and if you fight depression or whatever, our physical is so important. So sometimes it means with leaders going back and looking at, are they taking care of their energy throughout the day? Are they getting the exercise they need? Are they taking breaks? Because that's so foundational. And then emotional and IQ, EQ and IQ are kind of side by side instead of one on top of the other, because you do have to have some IQ in order to have some emotional intelligence. That is important. And then spiritual intelligence, Cindy has as a capstone. And that capstone is, we can reach a certain point in our development, but we can also go backwards. And I think that's what's so lovely and humbling, and fills all of it with some grace about how we need to be with ourselves. We're never finished, we're never done until we're not here anymore, right? So I can be really great one day, and then something might trigger me the next. And again, the question is, where am I going to react from, and how am I going to react, and can I keep my ego in the co-pilot seat and not in the pilot seat? And for what percentage of the time, and then when I don't, or when you don't, to say, wow, how, this is about forgiveness then. And it's about getting back on the horse and riding, but it is so much about forgiveness and grace.
Can I just share this? I know this is not Cindy's, but it might help the public just to grasp the initial pyramid that Cindy worked on, with the spiritual intelligence up the top, or the capstone as you mention it. But that just may help people get a grasp of visually what you've explained.
Right, so PQ, IQ, EQ, and SQ there, yeah. And so if you could take that pyramid and then put PQ underneath, and then IQ and EQ next to each other, and then spiritual intelligence as a capstone. And there's very many places that they bleed together as well. So, emotional intelligence, there's not a delineation between here's emotional intelligence and then here's spiritual intelligence. That you have to have some of the skills in emotional intelligence to have the skills in spiritual intelligence. So there's kind of a weaving together at the higher plateaus of the emotional intelligence. Yeah. So
I'm curious as to what you think about this, because I maintain that we're all connected to this higher intelligence, or as some people call it, noble self. But all of our problems occur when we don't perceive that we're connected. What's your view on that, Veronika?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Some of it is learning that we can connect to that higher self, and for some people it comes easier, and other people not so easy. And I think it does depend a lot on how people are raised and what their constitution is, and I think we're finding out so much more about neurology and brain chemistry when it comes to depression and anxiety and all kinds of, bipolar disorder, all kinds of things in terms of how that goes together. So, everything that we look at becomes more and more complicated, and the older I get and the more that I know and learn and all of it, the less I really truly know, but I think I'm wiser for it in some ways.
Yeah. Do you have a way of teaching people that they are actually connected to this higher intelligence? For instance, people are always using their intuition, but they, as you said at the beginning of the conversation, we're not sustaining it. And what you're teaching is to help people sustain it. But do you have a way of helping people to see and feel that they are actually connected to this higher intelligence?
So you're asking me if I have a way to connect people to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the work of looking at where you're at and asking those deeper, more powerful questions and helping people to uncover who they really are. And, you know, a lot of times I'll ask people, who have you come here to be? And that question is such a powerful question because it does tap into that higher state. Ken Wilber talks about states and stages, and many people have had a state experience where they have connected to that deeper wisdom, intuition, to a feeling of oneness, and through that connection, a lot of times people will think, well, they've been completely enlightened, but then they go do, you know, same behaviors from that ego state that we're talking about. So a state experience is something an experience that you've had, that feeling of oneness, and yet it's not sustainable. And we actually have to go through developmental stages in order to sustain more and more of that. So again, speaking the language of where that person is, helping them explore who they are at each stage, and being able to understand where they are at that stage. Because when we understand that, then we can help them, you know, go into that next stage or see if they're okay with where they're at. So it's not always up to me to make that happen for them, or to say that they should even go to that next stage. It's up to the person individually. So connecting to that intuition, you know, NFs, intuitive feeling people, have such like a sixth sense that they're so connected to that intuition, sometimes don't know what to do with it and think everybody walks around that way. And then you have other people who are much more sensing and thinking, so they don't necessarily, they operate in the world through that. So, you know, again, I never have like a blanket statement about how that should be done or how I would do that with everybody. I think some of the wisdom is to take people where they are in their developmental stages with the personality type that they have and with their own personal goals, and seeing where do they want to go. Is that important to them?
So how do you, I often talk about bridging the gap between where people are now and who they really are, and then bringing that together. So do you find this a good strategy in bridging that gap, the spiritual intelligence, I mean? Is that proven to be something that has been really meaningful to you in bridging that gap?
It's very meaningful for me in bridging the gap for myself and for many people that I work with, definitely in spiritual communities that I've worked with that are pretty open to, you know, more of this kind of thinking, and usually not so traditional. And then there's people who aren't ready for it, and I think that was kind of our earlier conversation, and people who really need to develop their intuition first, develop their emotional intelligence, understand who they are, where they're at, where do they want to go, who do they want to be, who have they come here to be. And it might look a lot different, who have I come here to be, that question at 1920 versus, you know, 30 versus 40 versus 50 versus 60, 70, 80. That question changes a lot from the first half of life, where what we really do is we try to find ourselves, we develop a career, we do all the things we're supposed to do for the most part. And then one day, you know, there's a time where we say, I did all the things I was supposed to be doing, and here's where I'm at, and why am I not happy? What's missing? And I think that's where that conversation that you're talking about is really essential and really comes in, um, from a deeper place, from why am I here, and what is the purpose? And I certainly asked those questions in my 20s, and they looked different, and the answers were a bit different than they are now. Uh, so, it was really about climbing that ladder and getting to where I thought I was supposed to be, because then I would be successful, or, whatever that might mean. So, I think the spiritual intelligence really comes on board in the late 30s through the 40s, for some people in their early 50s or late 50s. And sometimes people don't necessarily get there because of the maybe fear with that. So, I think what you're doing is you're breaking down those fears. You're helping people to understand things in a much more, in a way that people can take it in and eat it like food, and be able to do something with it and process it. And I think that's what we need, and that's why I like the 21 skills that Cindy has come up with, because she's done like 17 years of research with all of this and putting this together, and the assessment, worked very hard with a team of researchers, and it's from a very, very thoughtful place that she put this together. So, and I'm really excited because I'm going to start being a master teacher of her work now, and she hadn't let other people teach it until recently. She's got a couple people, John Freeman and Ian McDonald in the UK, and then Barry Johnson just started on the East Coast, and we're starting on the West Coast in September. So it's a 3-day training, and my life changed a lot from taking the training. So it's a real honor to be able to share it now and to be teaching it myself.
So I know you've done a lot of lecturing in universities in the past. Are you still lecturing to people in universities?
No, not so much. I am, the semester system and all that. I kind of like my freedom now, and to be able to work from anywhere, right? That's a nice thing about doing coaching, and I still do a little bit of therapy, but yeah, I like my schedule. I like to work from anywhere, and coach people in different parts of the world has been really exciting. So my teaching days are more where I go in and I do more intensives. I also teach hypnosis and help people to get certified, and do a lot of continuing education training for coaches and therapists and things like that. So it's definitely changed and fits where I'm at in my life a lot better.
So the question I was going to ask you, and maybe you can still answer it, is are you noticing a shift amongst younger people and becoming aware of their higher truth and how to connect with it?
Yeah, I would say that the internet is a wonderful thing, and the fact that there's so many people writing books and Kindle books is opening up a whole new world, and also people doing movies that are meaningful, and YouTube. I mean, look at this. This is amazing, where people can have a conversation and other people can watch and listen, and that's why I love doing interviews. There's more people that have access. Gosh, if I would have had access to some of this when I was a teenager in my early 20s, that would have been incredible. So, I think that when people are ready, I think that one thing that holds a lot of people back too is the use of drugs and alcohol. So I think, I'm not a big proponent of that, and I think that can definitely keep us in a lower state of developmentally, and keep us really stuck cognitively, emotionally, mentally, physically. So that surgence of drugs and alcohol, it's always been there, but I get concerned that that's a piece of it. So people get where they need to be, and everybody has their own journey, and it's about trusting people in their own journey, I guess, too.
Can you tell us a little bit about the role of meditation in all of this? I know you've released a book on Amazon called Meditation Now. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I didn't quite hear what you said. The role of meditation in.
Yeah, and you've published a book on Amazon called Meditation Now. So can you tell
Right.
us a little more about that?
Yeah, it's a real small book. It's a short book, and I have a lot of audios and videos where people can actually experience trying out different types of meditation to find what's right for them. Um, I decided at one point there were so many meditation books out there as I was writing, and I did a lot of research, and I've got a bigger book that I'm eventually going to publish probably. But I thought, people need to learn how to meditate and be shown and not just have to read a book about it. Because there's lots of books, meditation for dummies and all of that, right? But I wanted to give the experience, and that's when I started doing video. And I was trained in hypnosis by someone who was trained by Milton Erickson, and that was pretty spectacular. And I've since even renewed and done some additional training. But the power, I think, in educating people is in showing and giving them an experience. And so I like to give people the experience of that. I'm actually just coming out with an app called Gratitude for Joy, based on the neuroscience and the research around gratitude. And the practice of gratitude increases our feelings of well-being and our health and our relationships. And actually, people say they feel 25% more happy in their life by the practice of gratitude. And what was interesting is only once a week is enough. So if you sit there and think about 3 things you're really grateful for once a week, that's huge. How easy is that? So I have this little free app that's coming out pretty soon, and I talk on it, and then I have a video. It's not my video, it's the Gratitude HD video, and then also I have some self-hypnosis on gratitude and the practice of gratitude, and so I love that, weaving everything together. And to do another book, I just wanted to make it experiential so people can get the book and then they can log on and to the site that has all the audios and videos and explore, and even has a journaling on there that you can keep your own journal on there if you want. So it's really an experience and not just a book.
Where can people access this app, Veronika?
On Amazon, yeah. Yeah, it's Meditation Now, Your Guide to a Simple Practice.
Meditation Now, Your Guide to a Simple Practice. So is that part of your book? Because your book is on Amazon, isn't it?
Yeah. So you access the book, and inside the book is a link to where you go to. You put in your email address, and you have a code in your book, and then you can access all of that online. It's like an online training environment.
Excellent. That sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
Wonderful. You've got lots of things on the boil all at one go.
Yeah, I know. I don't. If I get bored, I find something else to do. I have lots of interests and lots of things, and always keep going, and and really trying to weave together what you show, that pyramid of the physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual intelligence. I think that's really the key. And so all that I do, I try to weave that in for folks and for myself. Got my little tracker on here, keep track of my steps and try to be healthy myself and do all those right things, even though I have a little cold right now. It's one of those summer colds, but weaving that together, I think, for ourselves is really foundational for connecting to all that is and getting back to being the oneness that we are in this one big family, because I see that we're spiritual beings having a physical human experience on this planet, and I'm really grateful to be here at this point in time and on the planet.
I talk about oneness quite a lot. What can you give me your your perception of what you mean when you say oneness.
Oneness. Well, I think it's quite a dynamic word for sure. When you get to the deeper and broader reaches of what oneness is, in simple terms, I would say that it's about all of us being from one source and being of one, even though we seem that we're so different. That we, I guess my best way to explain it is just my experience of it in meditation, in that everything is light and that we are light and that all of that light goes together. Just like when the sun shines, you don't see, it all broken up. You see if it hits a tree, then there's a shadow, but the light is still there. It's still on that. So I don't think I explain it very well, but I just think it has broad meaning, but that it is about all of us being one, and everything is one. And to tap into that place on a regular basis is just an amazing thing. And I think that meditation is the long-term work that we can do. It doesn't have to be meditation. It can be prayer for you. It can be gratitude, and can be keeping a gratitude journal. I think there's a lot of ways to get to that feeling of oneness, that state experience of it.
Excellent. Can you, going back to Cindy's definition, the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion. I know that she came up with wisdom and compassion. Can you just explain to people how she arrived at that? I'm thinking about the two-winged bird.
Yes. So she found a Buddhist quote that about love is a bird with two wings. One is wisdom and one is compassion. And the bird can't fly and love can't fly without both of those, without the wisdom and compassion. Because you can certainly imagine a person who has a lot of wisdom and no compassion. Well, they could tell you, you should do this and you should do that. And, all of a sudden the critic comes out, should. And they might have a big piece of the puzzle, and it could be wise, but it's certainly not compassionate. And is anyone going to hear it, or are people going to react and go away from that person? And then you could certainly imagine someone who has a ton of compassion and doesn't practice the wisdom with it. And we can think about codependency and overcare. And my friend Debbie and I, we've kind of renamed it to overcare. I mean, it's definitely codependency when you are in a relationship with an alcoholic or drug addict. But when we talk about overcare, it's that caring for another, because we have that compassion and we can feel sometimes what that other person can feel, but that we don't take care of ourselves in that. So then, resentment or anger, or why did you do that? I was here for you and you did that anyway. All kinds of controlling behaviors come up with that, right? Through our compassion. So it's the balancing the wisdom and compassion. Now, I am compassionate to where you are, and if I use my wisdom, is it a good time to jump in there and try to help you or save you? No. I understand this person needs to do it for themselves right now because they created this, and they aren't going to learn anything if they don't learn how to change what they're creating. So if I jump in and I rescue, and we certainly get lots of opportunities in life to to deal with that one, right?
So can you tell us a little bit more about the Consciousness Now TV show and how you put that together?
Yeah, certainly. I can't say it's anything super consistent. We have a lot of interviews on there. Just about everyone for Raising Consciousness Now. They come from different parts of the world. that are contributors. They have interviews on there, and there's so much to learn from all of them. And there's one on Consciousness Now TV's YouTube channel with Cindy, and she's also got a couple TED Talks now that are out. But it really arose out of wanting to teach more in front of the camera and get more messages out and to interview people and let people have their own genius shine. And, you know, and that's kind of where it came from. So, you know, you can find stuff on meditation on there. You can find interviews. Sometimes they're spontaneous, like Cynthia Bourgeot. I went to a workshop with her, and she talks about the law of three. So wherever there's two opposing forces, there's a third thing that comes out of that, and actually a fourth dynamic comes out of the conflict. So I got to interview her. She's a genius, and so that was just a spontaneous thing with an iPad, and you know, so I've gotten a bit braver and less self-conscious, and just like, okay, let's go for this and let's try it. You know, but wanting to give voice to more people who I think had important messages and have important messages. And I'm really all about, there's so much wisdom, you know, there's so many people that have something to say, and I think it's the common people that we need to hear from, and not the gigantic people up on the stage. I think that creating that ripple effect happens even dynamically from social media, like what you're doing, Graham. I just think is amazing too, because it takes time and commitment and figuring out all the technology that goes with it, and you know, and then to promote it and put it out there. People don't realize what it takes, and you know, it's you're doing it as a free service, you know, and it's amazing what you're putting out there to create a better world. And I think that in the state that our world is in, which really breaks my heart, to see, you know, people dying in the streets, people on one side of the fence killing the other people on the other side of the fence, and they're probably more alike than we would be alike to them, because they live in the same region and they've grown up in the same area, you know. So it's just heartbreaking there, and so all of that is heartbreaking and negative. I do a lot of polarity thinking in management. It's like, you know, there's the upside and the downside to everything, and it's a both and. There's beauty in the world and there's tragedy in the world at the same time. And how do we live with that? And how do we live with that inside ourselves? And what do we show? How do we show up? What do we do? What's our actions that we take, even in the small places in our life, in the little corners of our world? How are you when you go through the checkout stand in the grocery store, you know, at the bank, whatever? Do you meet people with a scowl or a smile? Are you making the world better? Or are you making it, you know, the same old, or are you making it grouchy? And all of that, I just fully believe that ripples out.
Really good. Veronika, tell me how, if people really resonate with what you're saying, how can they get in contact with you and start the process of feeling more connected to their higher self?
Yeah, well, if they're wanting to do the spiritual intelligence coaching or emotional intelligence coaching, to do the assessment, they can certainly email me. I'm on Google+. I have an email, or they can go to Consciousness Now Coaching, and there's a contact form they can fill out, or just directly they can email me at Veronika@drveronika.com. And Veronika is actually with a K and not a C. Most people think it's a C. So Veronika. You know, I'm certainly happy to do that, and I work with groups as well. So sometimes it could be fun if there's people in different parts of the world to have people and do group coaching and do the spiritual intelligence assessment, because I think you don't gain just from me, but from a whole group dynamic, and I love running groups that way. So if people are interested in that. And I also do mentor coaching for people who are coaches or people who are thinking about being coaches and wanting to get certified. I think that's kind of takes off from where I worked with young therapists, young in the field, meaning not that they were all young people, but training therapists. And I've done years of that, so it's really fun to do mentor coaching.
And are you concentrating more on coaching executives in the corporate world these days?
Not just the corporate world, also nonprofits, and I like to do leadership coaching, and I go into places and do team trainings. Like for a full day, I'll go in and teach about the Myers-Briggs and how teams can work together, strategic planning. The emotional intelligence is a big part of what I teach. Usually we don't go into corporations and teach spiritual intelligence, although eventually I might have a shot at Whole Foods. I don't know if you know Whole Foods where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
But there's John Mackey is the CEO of Whole Foods, and he is part of conscious capitalism. So, anyone who is in the business world, you might want to check out conscious capitalism. It is about saying that yes, we can make money, and yes, we can do it in a way that takes care of all the shareholders, not the stakeholders. The stakeholder is just one shareholder, but the planet, the earth, the people. It's about fair trade. It's about taking care of all of it. It's the oneness. It's going back to knowing that we're all one. And when we do something on the other side of the planet that's not okay, it does come back. And when we do something right, it does come back. And what is going to be sustainable? Because the way we're living and the resources we're using and the way we're treating people, it's not sustainable. And I think a lot of people think that we're in a crisis, really, in terms of what we're doing. And so the work that you're doing, Graham, is phenomenal. And I think it's part of what we all need to do, going in the right direction. So I applaud you, and I'm so grateful to do this interview with you, but also for the work that you're doing in the world.
Really appreciate that, Veronika. I think we all need to take accountability, but what I've come to realise is that accountability is taking responsibility for our own feelings, and not only our own thoughts, but our own feelings, and then out of that comes our actions. So,
right.
Yeah, that's the way I see it.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. Yeah, because all of that's energy going out there, right?
Definitely. So this has been a really, really exciting conversation with you, Veronika. I really thank you for your time, and I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and spending this time with us. This is called the Be Empowered Show. It's all about a conversation on how to feel empowered and how to feel connected as opposed to feeling separate from. So I'm your host, Graham Hopkins. I just want to ask you, viewers, if you could do me a favour and leave a review. If you have really got something out of this conversation with Veronika today, to go to iTunes and leave a review, and in that way this show will increase in its rankings and connect with a wider audience. If any of you would like to know more about the concepts that Veronika and I have shared today, like feeling more connected, spiritual intelligence, and feeling worthy within ourselves. Veronika also mentioned being in the flow. Then you can go to Amazon and purchase Veronika's book on meditation, or I also have a book called The Manifesto of Your Inspirational Mind. And if you would prefer to go to my website, www.beempoweredgroup.com, there's also a free ebook there called Know Your True Value and Worth. So on behalf of Veronika and myself, we wish you a wonderful future of abundance, joy, and spiritual intelligence. knowing that you are connected to one. Thank you very much, and blessings to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Excellent.